Right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, we're going to get started right away. Let me see if we need this. Do we need the mic today? Does this better the experience or testing? Testing. Okay. All right, testing. Testing.
So you do it that way.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, I think it just hit.
Was it there? Yeah. It was that.
Testing. Oh, yes. Okay, there we have it. Alhamdulillah. All right, we'll get started, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, and to encourage holding fast to the book of God in the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. So inshallah, we're going to start with, it's been a while, I think, since we last were together. And forgive me for that, because I understand when that happens, it breaks up sort of the flow of our learning. Last week, I had all 4 wisdom teeth taken out. And so I had that done on one day. On Tuesday, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't talk. So forgive me for that. I couldn't even do it from home. Like, I just couldn't talk. So but I had some practice with silence this week, of maybe a forced fasting from speech. But does anyone remember what the assignment was from the last time that we came together? And those who are online can also answer. What was the assignment we had?
If I remember if that was last time or the time before, was it about trying to understand something that we're not doing because we're being fearful of almost trying to add that others because people are just fear that should being in our hearts?
Yeah, it's basically like something that we can be doing, should be doing, that's good for us, that somehow it's because of an unreasonable fear. Right, it's a false fear. It's that's keeping us away from it and trying to confront that. So, how did everyone do with that particular assignment? If anyone, I mean, thank you for remembering it. Mashallah, that's wonderful.
I can share mine. So mine is something that I actually was not thinking about in that moment, and then it just ended up being something for me. So I was like thinking about the hijab for a really long time, and I was really anxious about it. Actually, I ended up putting it on yesterday.
Oh, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, mabruk. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
But I realized that a lot of my fears were like very reasonable, but
Yes.
some of them were not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
The more I thought about it, the more I was coming up with like little random, like scary excuses. I was like, well, I can't do it because of this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it.
Mashallah. Mashallah, just take the leap. You took the jump, but the leap of faith. Mashallah, tabarakallah. That's really beautiful. For those of you who are joining online, alhamdulillah, one of the sisters here was mentioning how she was reflecting on hijab and putting on the hijab, and she just put it on yesterday after confronting some of her fears, and some of them being reasonable, some of them not, but just kind of taking that leap of faith and confronting the fear, really. So mashallah, mabruk, that's amazing. May Allah bless you in it and make the path and the journey with it beautiful for you, inshallah, every day. Any other, I mean, I don't think anyone can top that. So, like, what was that? You started writing a topic.
I feel like at work, like it's in the middle of the day, so I have to like pray namaz too. And like something was like, I was just, now I'm just like unapologetic of like praying namaz. Like, oh, I got like, now I'm gonna go pray.
Mashallah. That's also really powerful. Wow. We're starting off to a good start in today's class. I mean, mashallah, this is that's really amazing. And again, for those of you who are joining online today, one of the brothers mentioned how in the beginning, like having to break for prayer, maybe was something you felt a little bit intimidated doing, but now you just do it unapologetically and you just tell people, I'm going to go pray, and you do it. So that's really beautiful, mashallah. And again, may Allah bless you in that and make it a beautiful journey for you and those around you, inshallah. I'm a little overwhelmed by these two responses. I wasn't expecting that, but you guys, mashallah, always, I take back from you guys more than you take from me. But any other thoughts or reflections? I'm almost afraid to ask, but any other from that particular assignment? Okay, no worries. We'll keep it at that, inshallah. I'm just gonna, this is not even as something related to what you guys, mashallah, have shared today, but what was it? So just, I'm thinking right now in this spot about the getting my 4 wisdom teeth removed and confronting that fear of dental work. I wanted to know, interestingly, in order to get myself to just do it, instead of like one at a time or 2 at a time or whatever, just go ahead. I wanted to know as little as possible. I was like, knock me out, give me whatever drug you need to give me. I don't want to be awake, and I'll deal with the aftermath. And I was not prepared for the aftermath. So there's that, like knowing as little as possible can sometimes, it helps you get into the door, but I just wanted to get into the door. And I knew that once you're into the door, okay, you're stuck with it. Like now you have to, there's no turning back. It's already done. So, anyways, like I said, mine does not even come close to measuring up to what you guys have shared today. But yeah, that's something as simple as like a medical procedure and just being like, I know it's the right thing. I don't want to know more than that, so I'm going to do that. Alhamdulillah. Okay, inshallah, we're going to start with the allegorical commentary from the verses we took last week in Surah Mumtahanah, the first 3 verses. And so, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So I'm going to read the verse as it is, and then I'm going to look at what Imam Ibn Ajiba's commentary for this verse, for this set of verses was. And again, this is the allegorical commentary. It's symbolic. It's not the actual tafsir which we took last time. O you who believe, take not mine enemy and your enemy as friends. You offer them affection, though they have indeed disbelieved in the truth that has come to you, expelling the messenger, and you for having believed in God, your Lord. If you have gone forth striving in my way and seeking my good pleasure, you show them affection in secret, while I know best that which you hide and that which you disclose. And whosoever among you does so has indeed strayed from the right way. Were they to come upon you, they would be enemies unto you and would stretch forth their hands and their tongues against you in evil, and they wish you to disbelieve. Your family relations and your children will not benefit you on the day of resurrection. He will distinguish between you. Or in the tafsir of Imam Ibn Ajib, it's actually, he will separate between you. And God sees whatsoever you do. So in the allegorical commentary, Imam Ibn Ajib, he compares the enemies, the outward enemies, right? The people who were rejecting the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ knowingly from the Quraysh. He draws a parallel to them and the lower self, because the lower self actually knows better. The lower self knows the truth. It knows like what's right and wrong, but the lower self still calls to and rejects what's right and pulls to what's wrong out of it, pure desire. So he says, take on the enmity of your lower self. Like, Assalamu alaikum, welcome. Take on as your enemy your lower self, which opposes Allah and His Prophet ﷺ and the awliya, the righteous inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ, and it sends against them its soldiers. Okay, so the lower self sends against Allah and the Prophet, and the awliya, its soldiers. And we could talk about what that could mean. He says, don't meet with this nafs. Don't gather with this lower self with love and affection and agreement, while it opposes and rejects that which comes to you from the truth on the path of struggle. And he says, it casts out the Rasul. Here he's not talking about the Prophet. He says the Rasul is al-warid al-haqiqi, which is basically like the true devotional inspiration. So we have in our lives moments, and we've all felt them, where your heart is inclined or pulled to do and follow and practice truth in a devotional manner. And so the lower self seeks to cast that out of our hearts. It comes, and then when it doesn't allow it to stay there, right? It wants to remove the effect of it, or remove that voice of truth. And it casts out sound and firm faith from the hearts. It removes you from the divine presence, hating that you believe in Allah as your Lord with true faith and conviction. So he says, do this, meaning take the lower self as your enemy. If you have set out to expel your hawa, struggling for my sake, Allah is saying, struggling for my sake and seeking my pleasure, and to know me. Like you're the reason why you're taking your lower self as your enemy is because you have set out to know me. And this is what you would do. He says, you show them, and again, this is the lower self and its soldiers, you show them affection and agreement in secret. And he says, and I know what you hide when you turn to them and their shares of the material world, and also what you announce or show of it. So whoever follows this turning toward the nafs and turning away from struggling against it has lost their way. It was said in the past, whoever you see following their desires, nothing of true gnosis of Allah can be expected of them. So that doesn't mean that this has to be qualified. Someone who's in the state of following their desires, right? So that's all they do is follow their desires. They can't in that state have that true gnosis of God, right? Because they filled their heart with other than Him. Can that person reform and be guided and then have the gnosis of God? Yes, absolutely. But while someone is in the state of just following their desires, nothing from that true gnosis of God can be expected of them. And he says, your relatives and and again, the material fortunes of this world can avail you not in place of Allah. And he says, temporary fortunes will end, and what is left on the day of judgment is regret and sorrow for having not done more. On the day of judgment, you'll be separated from those temporary fortunes because they were finite. They weren't meant to follow you into the next life. And Allah knows what you do and rewards according to our tiredness. Actually, the word that he uses is atab, like the tiredness. He rewards according to our struggle and also the difficulty faced. So I actually really liked the ending on this one, because it could be that a person is striving and then they fall. Like this is normal. Like you are making particular plans or goals in terms of your suluk, and you're doing fine, then all of a sudden you slip. And then it gets harder to get back up, or, the next time around, you may face another challenge. And so there's a reward in the struggle itself, and the harder the struggle, the more the reward. And so sometimes when people are like, why can't I get this right? Why am I struggling with this thing that I just can't seem to get right? It's the glad tidings is, as you're struggling with this thing that's hard or difficult to overcome, know that, alhamdulillah, that the very fact that it's difficult and that you're continuously trying to face it means that you're in a lot of reward. You're facing a lot of reward. So like something that, you can compare it to is the person who's trying to read Qur'an. right? In the beginning, when a person's reading Qur'an, they don't read smoothly and beautifully like on their first day, right? They're choppy, they get some of the harakat off, and they keep in it, like they really struggle through it, right? And so that time that they spend struggling through it in difficulty is actually more rewarded than the time that it was so smooth and it came naturally and they don't even have to try, right? Because of the tab, because of the exhaustion, because of the I'm not feeling so good, but I'm going to keep doing this even if I don't feel so good. And so I think this is one of the beauties of spirituality in Islam versus like I want to say modern New Age spirituality. Is in modern New Age spirituality, a lot of times like the path according to the New Age spirituality is about feeling good, right? So if you feel good, then you know that you're doing that path right or correctly. And like spirituality in Islam is not necessarily always about feeling good. You could be feeling really bad, but it's about being good, right? So sometimes it feels really bad to be good, right? Does that make sense? Like you're doing the right things and you don't feel like it. And there's a struggle in that. And whether it's the person who feels lazy to pray extra nawafil, or they feel it's not easy to forgive someone, or it's not easy to apologize when they need to apologize, and they're having to confront that. And it's hard on the lower self. That struggle itself is rewarded. And again, the more struggle there is, the more reward there is. And to not get down on yourself. I really think, I have office hours every week. And one of the things that comes up a lot in office hours in our community is this like waswas, a constant whispering of you're a failure, you're a failure, you're a failure. Oh, you didn't do that right, you're failing. Oh, and it's like, and so the person who's facing that whisper will end up, because of the despair really of what that is saying to them, and that you're not going to get you keep messing up, you're not getting it right, and you're never going to get it right, that whisper, or like you don't have what it takes to get it right. That whisper then someone who is not necessarily tempted by the desires and things like that, the haram, will end up doing something useless just to kind of dissociate from the whispers, right? To dissociate from that bad feeling. So they'll waste a lot of time doing whatever it is. It could be that they're on Netflix. It could be like excessive video games. It could, whatever, it's like a numbing. They have to go into something where they can just kind of feel numb, but they're not even attracted to that thing. They're not even like, they'll fall asleep while they're playing the video games or while they're watching whatever it is. It's not because they want to do it. It's because they're trying to numb, all this negative feedback. And unfortunately, they're believing that feedback. And we all know where that feedback comes from, right? Because who is going to stand next to you when you're doing something right and say you're failing? Who's going to do that other than our enemy, right? And that's the source of like even that being the lower self. Coming into the lower self is from the shaitan. That waswas is from the shaitan. And so so this is, I want to say, for glad tidings for the one who struggles, the one who finds it hard, because there's reward in that struggle. And the harder it is, the more reward there is. And then also just to know that the waswas is a lie. It's a big, big, big lie. And we have to unwork that lie when it's being thrown upon us. And, we set goals each week, and sometimes we meet them, sometimes we may fall short, but we want to keep it positive as much as possible. And actually there's a quote, and I want to read it in just a second. I want to find my phone. I saved it on my phone. And it's I read it in the ladies' halaqah we had last time, and for those of you who may have attended that online, but it's really I think something that we should remind ourselves of, because it's very easy to again to fall into an extreme, right? So the way the shaitan comes to us, to the person who's maybe not arrogant about what they're doing, is like it's not humility, it's despair, right? It's not humility, and there's a difference. So here it says a very interesting passage from Imam Sha'rani, and he's relating this from his teacher. He says, I have heard my master Ali al-Khawas state, remember your virtues as much as you can, as this will increase your gratitude to Allah. Beware of excessively dwelling upon your deficiencies, for your gratitude will thereby decrease. Any benefit you derive from turning your attention towards your faults, you will lose it by virtue of your blindness to the virtues which Allah has bestowed upon you. And he used to also say, being aware of your virtues is the default. Okay, being aware of the spiritual blessings that you have been given, that's actually the default. And as for your deficiencies, it is only required of a person to reflect upon them solely to avoid becoming awestruck by their own self. Okay, so how is this different than a lot of the messaging maybe you've heard? Have you guys ever heard anyone tell you to actually remember your virtues as much as you can? This was the first time I read it, right? Because a lot of the books that deal with talab al-ilm and the students of knowledge, it's actually the opposite advice, because talab al-ilm is itself virtuous, right? So the advice to people is that the expectation is the door that shaitan will attack the person who is studying and trying to grow and is in circles of studying and circles of scholars and whatnot, is that they will become arrogant. And so the advice tends to be harsh because it's trying to suppress that ego for the one who's in like elite circles of learning and whatnot. Now, does that apply to the average Muslim, that they need to constantly be crushed? No, and I think sometimes what's meant for scholars and what's meant for students of knowledge is given to the wider community, and they're not in the same boat, because that person in the wider community is like, I don't pray on time, so it's not arrogance that's their issue, right? It's actually feeling like they can never get it right. It's feeling that it's the magnification of their deficiencies to the extent that they don't think they could ever be, quote unquote, a practicing Muslim or religious Muslim, and so they just see themselves falling short all the time and they kind of give up. And so I think this is a good reminder for everyone in terms of encouraging us for that struggle against the lower self. One of the ways that we can maintain the struggle, especially if you hear the waswas that you're failing or you're not getting to where you want to get, is to remind yourself of the virtues that Allah has given you already. And he says that's the default. We remember our shortcomings as almost as an intervention, really. It's not the norm. You don't sit around thinking about everything that's wrong with you all day long. That's not the default. And for a lot of Muslims, unfortunately, it's become the default because they've misunderstood like texts about humility. They've misunderstood even like the spiritual path. I think I've mentioned it in this class before. I remember I once asked Imam Zayd, and like when I first knew him, and I asked him, I said, is hating yourself part of Islam? Are you supposed to hate yourself? And he said, no, absolutely not. And I kind of knew the answer is no, but I was wondering, like, how do you balance between like these certain messages and other messages? And he said something really interesting. He said, you can't hate yourself without subconsciously and inherently also hating God. You can't hate yourself without inherently hate. So I was like, wow, that's because we are a manifestation of his divine attributes, his divine names and attributes. So anyways, I wanted to just start with that, and then we will continue now, inshallah, to the verses that we have for this week. And this week, inshallah, we're going to go through verses 4 through, I believe, 7. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد كانت لكم أسوة حسنة في إبراهيم والذين معه إذ قالوا لقومهم إنا براء منكم ومما تعبدون من دون الله كفرنا بكم وبدا بيننا وبينكم العداوة والبغضاء أبدا حتى تؤمنوا بالله وحده إلا قول إبراهيم لأبيه لأستغفرن لك وما أملك لك من الله من شيء ربنا عليك توكلنا وإليك أنبنا وإليك المصير. This is indeed a beautiful example for you in Abraham and those with him. When they said to their people, truly we are quit of you and of all that you worship apart from God. We have rejected you, and enmity and hatred have arisen between us and you forever, till you believe in God alone. Save for Ibrahim saying to his father, I shall assuredly ask forgiveness for you, though I have no power to avail you aught from God. Our Lord, in you do we trust, unto you do we turn in repentance, and unto you is the journey's end. ربنا لا تجعلنا فتنة للذين كفروا واغفر لنا ربنا إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. Our Lord, make us not a trial for those who disbelieve, and forgive us. Our Lord, truly you are the mighty, the wise. لقد كان لكم فيهم أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر ومن يتول فإن الله هو الغني الحميد. You have a beautiful example in them for whosoever hopes for God in the last day, and whosoever turns away, truly God is the self-sufficient, the praised. عسى الله أن يجعل بينكم وبين الذين عاديتم منهم مودة والله قدير والله غفور رحيم. It may be that God will forge affection between you and those of them with whom you are in enmity. God is powerful and God is forgiving, merciful. So these are the verses for this week, inshallah. And these verses there's a lot to cover, alhamdulillah. So as it relates to the second verse, the fourth verse, Imam Ibn Ajiba, he mentions that in the beginning, when it's talking about the beautiful example of the Prophet Ibrahim, he says, this is not just like any example, this is a guiding and leading example. It's a qudwa, like this is one that leads you, shows you your direction. He says that, and it's a beautiful quality that is praiseworthy, and the one who follows it is going to be bettered and elevated by it. So what is this beautiful quality? Actually, before we go to that, who are the people who are exemplifying this quality? Ibrahim and those with him. And there's a difference of opinion. Who are those with the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam? So that's a question I'm asking you guys. Who are those who are with the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam? His wife? Yes. Anyone else? I see a hand raised. Is that a hand raised or no? Okay. That was a stretch. Mashallah. So there is a difference of opinion. Imam al-Tabari believes, and others believe, that it's those with the Prophet Ibrahim refers to the other prophets, because they had the same way. And then the second opinion, and that's in the tafsir of Imam al-Razi and also Imam al-Suyuti, is that those who followed the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Imam Ibn Ajiba, he mentions both opinions as well, and he says that the opinion that it's not just all the prophets together, but he says al-anbiya al-mu'asirin lahu wa qariban min asrihi. So these are the prophets that were contemporaries of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and those that were close to his time. What was that? Yes. And also Ibrahim alayhi salam ended up having, obviously, Ismail and Ishaq and whatnot. So he says that it's the prophets that were in the time of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the reason why they said this is because, and he says this, and Imam Tabari says this is the correct opinion, because at the time when the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was facing Nimrod, right? Sarah is quoted to have said, and she said to the Prophet Ibrahim, that there isn't anyone on the face of this earth that worships Allah except me and you. This is a statement. And so they said, because this has been recorded from Sarah, there were no, remember, the Prophet Ibrahim was often described as a one-man ummah, right? Because in the beginning of his prophethood, no one actually followed him. He didn't have followers. And so those with him would be then the other prophets. Just for a second, try to imagine if like you and only one other person were the only people who worshipped Allah on earth. Like, how would that, can you imagine? Like, we can't even imagine it, right? The other day I was reading in Sirah that at the time that the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Hamza, became Muslim, and the Muslims had come out and they were announcing the Islam, there were only 30 believers in the city of Mecca, like 30. And that's like, the amount that comes to like a weekly class or, but that's the total amount of believers at the time that Hamza alayhi salam accepted Islam. And so we forget, like what the world was like in previous times and eras. Alhamdulillah, we're not tested with what the people before us were tested with. And so that's the opinion as it relates to who are those with the Prophet Ibrahim. And then this statement, truly we are quit of you. In Arabic, like you would say, inni bari'un minkum, right? Like bari is singular. Here, I got tongue twisted because it's the plural of bari, which is bura'a. And then, so that's quit is an interesting translation for that word. For the Arabs in the room, it's more like I'm free of you. Like I have nothing to do with what you're doing. Like, I'm innocent of what you're doing. That's the person who's bari is also innocent. So it's like drawing a line in the sand, like you guys are doing one thing. I have nothing to do with it. In front of God, my hands are not anywhere close to what you guys are involved in. I'm not with you as a people, as a group. I'm not associating with you because of what you've decided to do. And, and it's that level of like separation, this drawing the line in the sand. And it's when you read it in Arabic, it sounds also, this part is, it's very understandable, but the second part, which is kafarna bikum, right? وَبَدَى بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةُ وَالْبَغْضَاءُ أَبَدًا. Like that's a very heavy statement. Like, we reject you. We reject you, and now there's an enmity and even a hatred that has arisen between us and you forever. And it says, until you believe in God alone. Now, how do we reconcile this statement with the idea of tolerance for other beliefs and opinions, and their tolerance for other religions, living amicably with your non-Muslim neighbors? Even the word that's used in the Qur'an for living with people like from Ahl Kitabs, that we have bir with them, we have like the best of good behavior with them. So how do we reconcile these two concepts? Especially because this is being said, this statement, this stand that the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam took and the other prophets took is being shown and emphasized as an uswatun hasana. Like, this is a very important thing that they did. That's a guide for the rest of us. I'm genuinely asking, how do you guys reconcile?
Use wisdom, maybe, in how you're approaching based on the different situation.
So there's, how you mentioned that like the people who opposed the prophets knew that the prophets were prophets, and they knew that the prophets were coming to them from God, and they knew that the message that they were coming with was also the truth. This is a very different category than just people who don't believe in what you believe in, right? We live in a pluralistic society. It's like people who've made it their goal to shut you down because, like the Prophet Ibrahim was a prophet of God, a true prophet, and they knew he was a prophet, and they had all of the miracles they needed. Anyone who opposed him saw the miracles. They knew, and yet they were like, but I don't. It's like Pharaoh. It's a pharaonic attitude towards the prophets and the truth itself.
Ibrahim alayhi salam, because he also did the example in front of them and put the tax on the bigger sanam. And in the area that follows, that they went back and realized they were wrong.
that he was right and they were wrong, but they went and
They wanted to kill him
changed
anyways. Yeah.
their mind.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, like it's different.
It's the Quraysh who rejected the Prophet knew he was a prophet. There's so many statements from them. Like where they said, I wish it would have come to my son, like the meaning, I know he's really a prophet, but why did it go to him and not my own kids? Why did it go to not my tribe or my clan in particular? And that was the reason of their animosity. It's very satanic, actually, right? So so this is a very different level. There will always be, for the one who hates you because you're coming with the truth that they know is the truth, there will always be until the end of time in animosity.
So you take stronger stand with those groups.
This one is a strong stance, yeah, but it's also, you don't have to actually say it, but I think for us right now as a community, just to know that will always, for someone who rejects the truth while they know it's the truth, they will always have enmity for you. Right, because and their enmity is only going to be because you are coming to them with the truth. That is so long as you still are holding on to the truth, they will always be your enemy. And especially because they know it's the truth. This is not the same as the one who believes in a different way and they're like not going to bother you and not going to stop you or try to kill the prophet or try to kill your people or try to eradicate your community. These are people who are basically hell-bent on eradicating the presence of the prophets and the presence of the religion itself amongst the people. So it's a shirk that is a person, the community who's practicing the shirk, they've basically devoted themselves to the shirk, knowing what the truth is and knowing that the shirk is wrong. And the shirk has other benefits for them, and that's why they're following it. And Imam Ibn Ajib comments against this, and he says the enmity of the kuffar, of this kind of kafir is the one who knows it, is because of your iman and the truth. And so you have to you're going to be striving against them. You will strive against them so long as their rejection is present, then their enmity is also going to be present. And the only way that you would, and essentially this person sees that, and then they put their trust in God. Now, on a much lesser level, like forget like the level of killing prophets and like eradicating the Muslim community and the economic boycott that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his followers were facing, or all of the persecution that believers faced in the past, like in Surah Al-Buruj and other parts of the Qur'an, where people literally were persecuted because they followed the truth and the one that was coming to them with the truth. And so put those on one side, and those are very extreme examples, but they're real. They're very, very real at the same time. And just think about even the world as it is today. Are there not people who are penalized and punished because they're doing something good, right? Because they're saying something out loud that's the truth that nobody wants them to say out loud. That's the truth. So they're going to be punished for that because that is an inconvenient truth. It hurts somebody in some way. It hurts their agenda. So long as someone is standing on that truth, they will be persecuted and they will have enemies. And we see that in so many different realms. Like you see that on a political level. You might see that in social justice issues. I mean, there's many, many examples. So Ibn Atiyah, he says the example that's being mentioned here about Uswatun Hasana in the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says it's actually very specific. And it's specific to this act of separating, the believers separating their ranks from the ranks of the mushrikeen. And the shirk that they're committing. And he says this is something that all the prophets did. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has the best example ala al-itlaq, meaning every aspect of what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's existence and what he brought is the best example. So when it comes to the aqa'id, when it comes to what he teaches in aqidah, what he came with in terms of the law, the very way of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the highest example. So when you see like the Uswatun Hasana, on one side, it's referring to this, he's saying it's tied to this very specific act that's shared between the prophets. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, it's in all of his acts. It's in all of his ways. Also, this part where where the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says, he makes a dua for his father. What's interesting in the verse is it says that and this also like emphasizes the point I just made from Ibn Atiyah, is that truly we are quit of you and all that you worship apart from God. We have rejected you, and enmity and hatred have arisen between us and you forever until you believe in God alone. And then he says, save for Ibrahim saying to his father, and here he means except. So the Prophet Ibrahim, he took an exemplary stand, except in this one case, what he did was not the exemplary stand. And that's when he said these words to his father. And Imam Ibn Ajib, he mentions that these words that he said to his father, thou shalt assuredly ask forgiveness for you. He said those words, and he said this istighfar of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam for his father is understandable. So it's like jaiz aqlan, like we can understand where it came from. But it technically at the time that he said those words, it technically was allowed because the prohibition for that act had not yet been revealed. So he wasn't doing something forbidden. Because that prohibition hadn't come down yet. But he said, but that act and those words is not taken as part of the good example that we're supposed to follow. Okay. So here we have another thing that arises. Can you pray for the forgiveness of someone who has knowingly rejected God? And the answer from the scholars is no. But what about praying for their punishment to be alleviated? Can you pray that people, not alleviate, lessened, not alleviated, because that means complete removal, but lessened? Can one pray that someone's punishment is lessened? Yes, you can pray for that. That's an act of mercy Allah can show to even the people who are thrown in hellfire, is their punishment can be lessened.
How do you do that in Arabic?
I think it's through rahmah.
Yeah.
And I've seen or even may God be with them. And that means like God is already with all of us, right? So meaning in a good way, in whatever way that is going to. The two examples that come to mind from the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is that Abu Lahab's punishment is lightened on Monday. And why is it lightened on Monday? Because when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born, he celebrated. And he I forgot exactly how he had done the celebration, but because he celebrated the birth of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ was born on a Monday, his punishment is slightly lightened on Monday. So a good act can lessen punishment. The uncle of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is said to have his punishment was also lessened because of how much he helped the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, even though he didn't outwardly announce faith. Yes.
How come you can't pray for the forgiveness of people who like openly rejected God?
Short answer that I would say is just because Allah prohibited that. You can't we're not supposed to pray for their forgiveness. On a like, how do I
Guidance.
after they died.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or even like if a person is persisting in their kufr, you don't say, oh, I'm going to ask that Allah forgives you. You could say, oh, I'm going to pray for their guidance.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, you can pray for their guidance. If they're alive, you pray for their guidance. And you can couple it. Someone's sick and they say, pray for me. You say, okay, Allah guide them and heal them. But starts with guidance and then anything else while they're alive. After they're dead, then it's just, we pray for mercy. And so going back to this, to the statement of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says, though I have no power to avail you aught from God, which means I can't forgive you. The Prophet Ibrahim has no power to forgive the person. I cannot guide you, meaning the guidance, even guidance itself, and the prophets are guides, but technically real guidance is, the ultimate, they're the asbab of guidance, and Allah is al-musabbib. He's the one who allows the guidance to reach the heart and open the heart. So the true guide is actually al-hadi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it means I can't grant you tawfiq, like I can't grant you success in your spiritual path. Like that doesn't come from a prophet, that comes from God. And so here, I think there's some lessons to take from that. It ends with, our Lord, in thee do we trust, unto thee do we turn in repentance, and unto thee is the journey's end. And here it's this dua is one that emphasizes tawakkul, like putting our trust in God, and also that the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is saying, I'm turning my affair over to God. Now, the first interpretation that those with him refers to the prophets. If you follow that understanding, then the believers are told to look at the example set by all the previous prophets. When they said to their people, so the previous prophets also kind of like drew that line in the sand. And they sought to dissociate and distance themselves from the disbelievers in their respective communities. Now, I want us to think about this for ourselves in terms of dissociating ourselves and distancing ourselves, not as fellow citizens and neighbors and people who live in a society with other people, but from a point of principle that, like, I will never become what you want me to become, right? And so I'm free from what you're doing. You know, like, I don't believe in a gender spectrum. I just don't. I believe that God created male and female, right? So I don't believe that there's like multiplicities in gender. I believe there's two, you know, and so I can never come onto your way. I can never change that. Because of, I believe in creation. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The chicken, you know. These are things that, like, evolution, right? Like, we didn't come out from nothing. These are areas of principle that we don't have. I'm not going to negotiate and change what I believe to make you more comfortable. And I'm going to draw a line in the sand, actually, and say, like, I'm actually free from what you're calling people to. I don't want to have anything to do with what you're calling people to, because I think that's how wrong it is. And there are some issues in the world that are literally going to, you know, they're causing, I would say, great destruction. And one of the proofs of this destruction is how the mental health crises have increased substantially because of some of these things. Materialism is a path to addiction, depression, emptiness, and all of the sins that are associated with that. So no, I'm free from what you're calling to. I want to, again, because I'm going to maybe spend some time on this. This is why the Prophet Ibrahim and those with them are being praised. This uswatun hasana, that they had the courage and the strength to make that distinction. And we need that courage today. Our communities need that courage today. And we don't have to be mean, we don't have to be rude, we don't have to be in any way dehumanizing. That would actually be going against what the verses are, you know, what we're being called to. But we shouldn't live with an inferiority complex for people who are following things that are clearly false or just made up. Like, people know these are man-made theories, right? So a person, even if they think it's right, they know that a human being sat there and thought about something and created a theory about something, and they want to follow that. And you're like, no, I want to follow what God has revealed, revelation, right? You know, my epistemic source is God, you know, my source of knowledge is God. Your source of what you believe to be true is a person. And so, you know, there's a huge difference. There's with young people, especially, and I want to say this, and you know, this idea of being able to separate, I think, is an important quality to put in everyone, and also in young people, especially in young people. And if they're going to not an Islamic school, even if they're going to an Islamic school, like, this idea that you don't have to follow what everyone else is doing, you don't have to be affected by the current trends if you don't want to. Like, you have a choice in who you're going to be. And if anyone tries to make your life difficult because you're choosing to follow something principled, you can cut them loose. You don't need to be associated with what they're associated with. I think that's alhamdulillah, like when I was younger, I think my mom, I went to public school, right? So one of the things my mom used to say, and today I think therapists and counselors would say, don't say this, but it worked. So there's like the old school and there's the new school. But I remember I'd come home and I'd be like, these students, complain about like what other people are doing. And I'd say like, there's too much peer pressure. In Farsi, my mom would say peer pressure, chias. Like, what is peer pressure? We don't flinch in the face of peer pressure. Like, what is that? It's nothing, And I just remember thinking like, okay, but it feels like something, but she would say it with such like, like, you don't have to be worried. You don't need to worry about what other people is. And it would actually be like, okay, I don't have to. But one of the reasons why, alhamdulillah, I feel like I was really protected from being affected by what other kids were doing was because of that like constant investment. Oh, they're not Muslim. They don't follow the same code as you, and you don't have to follow what they're doing. And you can do your thing, basically. You can do what you believe in, and that's fine. And I feel like that was useful. That was really useful. I feel like today what parents are constantly trying to do is, let me try to change my kid to make them feel more comfortable in their classroom so that other kids can get used to them and the kid has a more positive experience because now my kid is more relatable and all these things. And it's like, I think Brother Ali talks about it in some of his music about like when he, as an albino, his mom would dye his hair blonde. But instead of that, so that other kids wouldn't make fun of him, because he would get made fun of a lot because of being albino and the look of his hair. And so every single time he'd go into the salon to get his hair dyed blonde, it would actually crush his self-esteem, because it's like, why do I have to change me to make them happy? Why do I have to, there's nothing wrong with this. Why do I have to, like, it's a secret. He can't tell anybody, and he went one time and his hair turned pink because I used the wrong hair dye or whatever it was. And then he had to deal with that. So it's like, it was crushing his self-esteem. It was crushing his like, and it was actually befriending an African-American lady. I don't know if it was a lunch lady or who, but she was basically the person who gave him courage to be like, you're perfectly fine the way you are. And he stopped dyeing his hair and whatnot. But it was like the African-American community who had already dealt with so much isolation, and they already knew. There was like what you're going through. This is like what our community has gone through for 300 years and more. So they gave him what he needed to then be proud of himself. And I know we talk a lot about like a Muslim identity and unapologetically Muslim, but that's not just as an identity. That's also like in your practice, in your beliefs. So I can't say I'm unapologetically Muslim and then go to an LGBTQ parade. I just can't. Those two things are not they're not congruent. I can say I don't want people from this background to be persecuted or harmed, and and I believe in the human dignity of all human beings. But I don't need to push another agenda, that's not mine. That doesn't come from my religion. I don't need to change. There's nothing. Why would I change the truth? You know what I mean? To fit into something false. Why would I change the truth? Instead, I need to be inviting other people to the truth and to do it in a good way. So I'm saying all this just to emphasize for ourselves and for our kids and for our families, like, why is this being honored in the Qur'an so much? This is a huge thing. Like when there's the way that it's being commented on is this particular act of the Prophet Ibrahim and other prophets is uswatun hasana. And there's the verses continue to emphasize this as we go on. All right, I need to get through the rest of the tafsir, but we will come back to this, inshallah. So according to both interpretations, Ibrahim seeking forgiveness for his father is not considered a beautiful example to be followed. Because we're not supposed to seek forgiveness for the disbelievers, we can pray for their guidance, but for not their forgiveness. In Surah At-Tawbah, Ibrahim alayhi salam himself, he realizes this, and Allah tells us this aspect or this part of the story as well. But when it became clear to him that his father was an enemy of God, he repudiated him. That's in Surah At-Tawbah. In other passages, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is also told to seek forgiveness for his followers, right? So the prophets did ask for forgiveness for people who believed. The Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, he says he's going to seek forgiveness for his sons. But when it comes to people who we're not supposed to ask for forgiveness for them, our asking for forgiveness will not help them. And so that's in the Qur'an as well. In Surah Al-Munafiqun, it is the same for them, whether you ask forgiveness for them or you don't ask forgiveness for them. God will never forgive them. Truly, God guides not iniquitous people. Yes.
Oh, I was just wondering if, like, in this world, you can ask for forgiveness for disbeliever, but on Judgment Day, can you intercede on someone's behalf for someone who is a disbeliever?
So the disbelievers, there's no intercession for forgiveness, but there is, and again, disbeliever here is the kafir. Okay, so the kafir is the one who knows the truth and rejects it. There are people who, we talked, I mean, I don't remember when we've discussed it, but there's a discussion, there's a debate about people who never got to know the truth of Islam. And it's not because they were not open to knowing it. It was because it just never came to them in a way where they could even like have that choice in their life. And what's described about people like this is that they will have a test for them on the day of judgment. There are people who literally, they believe in God and they believe in a higher being. They believe in, and they follow makarim al-akhlaq, like not oppressing people and things like that. And on the day of judgment, these are people who will have a test. And if they pass that test, they'll be counted amongst the believers. And so we don't say just because a person is not Muslim in an outward sense that they're destined for hellfire. We don't say that at all. But we would say that Allah knows best. If someone has recognized Islam, had the, and rejected it, that's a kafir. But who's the one who judges who's a kafir and who's not is actually Allah. When the prophets are there, the kuffar are very clear because the prophets bring miracles from God that are so clear that they're prophets. And the people rejecting them know who they are. They know that they literally would say things like, there was one statement about, I would talk to you about something, but I'm afraid Muhammad's going to receive revelation about it. Like they knew that he's receiving wahi from the angel Jibreel alayhi salam. It's a very different category of an enemy of God, right? Versus someone who just believes in something else. And again, for that person who just believes in something else, we leave their akhirah to God. We're not going to put a label on it. Outwardly, you don't pray on them. You don't do a janazah on them because they're not, they haven't announced their Islam. But in terms of where their hereafter is, I know people who are converts to Islam and they became Muslim and their parents were maybe religious Christians or religious, one of them a deist. They were Christian and they didn't believe in the Trinity, but they believed in Jesus as a prophet. They just never arrived at Islam. And they have dreams of their parents in paradise all the time. So like, I don't know if the dream is true or not true or whatnot, but I know this much is God knows who had Iman in their hearts and who was trying to actually worship him and who received the message and who didn't receive the message. In one case, I think it was someone that was a convert to Islam. They dreamt that when they became Muslim, their grandmother who passed away came to them and told them, you chose the truth and you actually chose the way of your forefathers, meaning he had Islam in his lineage long before he had converted to Islam, but he didn't know that until he saw it in a dream. So anyways, those are all nuances to this discussion and like why it's really important to define who this category of people are. These are people who are set out, they are hell-bent to stop the Muslims, not just reject them, but to basically stop them from practicing, stop them from sharing the message of Islam. So the ability of the prophets and angels to pray for the forgiveness of others is related, is also, there's a topic of intercession, and it's a debated topic, but intercession exists. The prophet will intercede for his ummah on Yawm al-Qiyamah. That hadith is not in any way rejected. Like he will intercede to even have the day of judgment started, right? Like everyone's waiting for the hisab to start. So that exists. And again, these are for people who believe. Our Lord, make us not a trial for those who disbelieve. And forgive us, our Lord, truly thou art mighty and wise. The pleas in this verse there's 4 different meanings that this can mean. So I'll just say that when I first read the verse, رَبَّنَا لَا تَجْعَلْنَا فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, I used to always think, before reading the tafsir, make us not a trial for those who disbelieve, meaning don't let the way we behave as Muslims be a reason that non-Muslims don't see the truth, right? Like, don't make us a fitna, because it's really important that they find the truth. If we don't want to be the ones getting in the way of them finding the truth with our, our like manners being bad and our behavior being bad. This is what I used to always think. And then I read the tafsir and I'm like, okay, so it doesn't actually mean this, but you can still take, according to the 4th meaning, that can fit into the 4th meaning of this particular dua. So the first opinion, and this one is mentioned in a number of tafsir, the plea in this verse is, do not let the disbelievers defeat us, such that then they are fooled into thinking they are followers of the truth. Right? So if they win on the battle, or if they win in whatever way, they gain the upper hand, then that could be a cause for them to not realize that what they have is actually the truth coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a huge rahmah in that prayer also, right? Like, we don't just want them not to have become more powerful than us or have victory over us, because we don't want to lose, but if they do, this will prevent their guidance. I think that's a really deep concept. The second opinion is, do not let the disbelievers defeat us such that they will be punished on account of what they have done to us. So that's another meaning in this verse. And this is the opinion of Imam al-Razi. So this can be seen as expressing the desire that evil not befall the disbelievers, since from a Quranic perspective, that is the likely outcome of a situation in which the believers are a trial for disbelievers. In Surah Al-Buruj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, truly those who persecute believing men and believing women, then do not repent. Theirs shall be the punishment of hell, and theirs shall be the punishment of burning. So there's a prayer, like, we don't want them to be in a situation where they're harming us, and as a result of them harming us, they then receive the punishment of hellfire. So don't let the fitna happen in the first place between us. And again, there's a lot of mercy in that prayer. It can also be understood as a general prayer that all trial and strife fitna not arise between the believers and disbelievers. So that, what I mentioned could potentially fit there, because then if there's a trial between the 2 parties, again, any kind of fitna, it can be something that blocks people from realizing the truth of the religion. Now, where it says in the verse, there's a repetition, Rabbana, and this is nida, this is a call to God. And Imam Ibn Ajib, he says that the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like our Lord, is being repeated to emphasize the humility by which the dua is being made, and also that the one who is making the dua is turning completely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the mighty, and He is the one who does not disappoint the one who puts their hope and trust in Him. So this is this is Imam Ibn Ajib's reflection on the beautiful name of Allah, Al-Aziz, being mentioned. And Al-Aziz has, the name Al-Aziz we've talked about before, but here in this context, he's saying he's being called upon by this name because the one who calls upon him by this name will not be disappointed. The one who calls upon him by this name with full trust. And then the second, the wise, he said, the wise is the one who does not do except that which has the most supreme wisdom. Imam Ibn Ajib also adds to this that, the plea, do not let the disbelievers defeat us, such that they would harm us in a way that would be beyond our capacity to bear. So there's also, in his interpretation, he doesn't want there to be a fitna that then actually becomes a fitna even for the religion of the believers, right? Because if they were to persecute them in a really, really heavy way, and it's beyond their ability to bear, then that could harm their religion as well. And again, it's emphasized after we mentioned before, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِيهِمْ أُسْوَةٌ. You have a beautiful example in them, who the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and those with him, likely most, the opinion that everyone is going with, I shouldn't say everyone, most of the Mufassirin are going with, is the other prophets that were around in his time. So you have a beautiful example in them for whosoever hopes for God in the last day. And here, this aspect of it is what they did, and taking that as an example is not just for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the companions, it's for anyone who's going to believe afterwards. Like we all the believers have to take this as an example. And again, this repetition is to emphasize the point that what they did was right. What they did was hard, but it was right and it was excellent. And whosoever turns away, truly God is the self-sufficient, the praised. So there's a number of things that are mentioned here. The example of the Prophet Ibrahim and his people dissociating themselves from the disbelievers among their own tribe is the model for those who anticipate the meeting with God and hope for the reward of the hereafter. Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Qur'an and Surah Al-Zukhruf is reported to have said to his father and his people, again, truly I am quit of that which you worship. Save him who originated me, for surely he will guide me. So this idea, again, of dissociation, it's extremely important in the context of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the companions, and it's relevant for all time. The hardest thing that many converts struggle with when they first become Muslim is the rejection of their peers, of their family, of what they're doing, and that their family often will try to get them to just go back to the way things used to be in some way or form. So it might be like, okay, fine, you're Muslim, but are you going to come to the party next week where there's going to be alcohol and this and going to be all these things? And it's like, it's not because their family is an enemy of God, necessarily, but there's this pull of like, we don't want you to be over there. We want you to be over here with us doing what we used to all be doing together. We don't want that to change. And like making that line in the sand, saying, I have a different way, is very, very hard. It's a very hard thing for the person who's converting to Islam to do. It's also really hard, even for people who are we have born again Muslims, right? We have Muslims who discover the religion later on in life, and then their old friends get mad at them. Their old peer groups get mad at them. Maybe their family is like really, really angry about their practice of Islam. I've heard all sorts of stories, like, unfortunately, that you would think that the family is not Muslim based on what they're doing. Sister who would secretly wear hijab, and her father found out and basically beat her up. I mean, like it's a crime. Like that's how, and it's a Muslim family, and you're like how? Why would you do that? It's very, very hard. And so this idea, even like there's the psychological, emotional aspect, but then there's also like the very real trial of I understand what I'm losing by drawing this line in the sand, and I'm going to do it anyways. And it's an important one and the next verse is going to show us the wisdom, not the wisdom, but show us one of the things that God has given as a gift afterwards. And he says again, this quality is to be followed and to be copied by everyone who believes. It's not just for the Prophet Muhammad and the companions. And again, remember in the Prophet's time, the tribe was everything. The tribe was everything. Like we need Shaykh Fuad here, the historian, to come and talk to you guys about the way that the tribe was everything for the people of that time. But this was like, not just, it wasn't getting rid of the tribe, but it was getting rid of tribalism. And like now your community is not just your tribe. Like your people are based on faith. It's not based on the family that you came from, or the color of your skin, or the language that you're speaking, or the city that you're living in. It's like literally based in who believes. Now, people that believe, they're your brothers and they're your sisters. And the poorest person from the poorest tribe is your brother and your sister. And the richest person from the richest tribe are like, you're in the same room and you're brother and sister, and you have rights over each other. I mean, it's replacing like another way. And this is really harsh. Like, we're thinking about social realities. There's a lot of reasons why people were invested in the tribal system. And when Islam came, the disruptions that took place were really, really heavy. We don't have tribes today, but we do have some, I want to say there are communities that have more or less influence on us, right? And it could be that, I think it was Sheikh Walid who was recently talking about this, how in America, they wanted to get rid of, at some point in the entertainment industry, they wanted to replace certain concepts. So you see this in the media. They went from glamorizing a long time ago, traditional America, but there's an understanding of a traditional family. And this is where you get a lot of your support and you get your, happiness even that you have in life is in the family. And then it transitioned. No, you leave the family. Now your family is actually all your friends, right? Friends. And lots of shows that show your family is the person that you really rely on is not your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother, your uncle, your cousin. It's a group of friends that you have decided to live with, and now your friends, they're your family. And then they got bored of that concept and they said, no, your family is actually your coworkers, right? So then so many different sitcoms and whatnot is all about like relationships at work and ways of being with each other at work that usually that's the way you're supposed to be with your family. But this person doesn't spend any time with their family. They're always at work. And so now they're expecting their coworkers to be like family. And then what's now interesting is he said that like some of the more, like I think it's in the movie, I haven't seen it yet. And I can tell you since I haven't seen it, it's not a spoiler alert because I haven't seen it. And I don't know anything about the movie. But he said that in the movie Wakanda Forever, right? Have you guys seen it?
No.
Okay. No, I'm not telling you to go see it, but he just mentioned that what they wanted when they wanted to show the advancement of a civilization, and that's the people of Wakanda, they went back to honoring the family as your family. So these people, they're advanced in this African, this hidden country in the African continent because family is family. So they went through all these other, peer groups and whatnot. And then now the what is the peak of civilization? And that is represented in Wakanda. Well, the Wakandans they have real good, they tight knit families. So why did I mention this right now? What was my point, Marcus? Yeah. It switches, yeah. And then like young people are affected by this, right? So whatever it is being watched, this affects their assumptions about you saved him. This affects their assumptions about like who they are, right? Because it's from the entertainment that people see in the media that people see that they form beliefs about their own identities. And so we're thinking about peer pressure, fitting in, bad company, right? And also the slippery slope, it really starts with the people who are around you and that who are you going to have as your close awliya, right? The earlier verses talk about don't take as your awliya the enemies of Islam. Don't take as your like close friends, people who have set out to like kill the Prophet ﷺ, people who have set out to remove the Prophet and the believers from their lands and their homes. So alhamdulillah, I don't think anyone here does that, right? But we do things in a subconscious way. I do think that our community, there's a climate of feeling like what we have to offer is less than what maybe a popular trend is. And it may not even be as conscious, but it definitely exists. So as an example, if women are being mistreated in any Muslim community or society, if Muslim women are and they are mistreated, a lot of times they are, what do I need to correct that?
Go back to the roots of Islam.
Go back to Islam. Go back to what the Prophet ﷺ said. Go back to what our religion actually, how it actually treats women, which is very, very advanced. I know people who they studied women's rights in Islam, and that's the reason they became Muslim. They literally converted to Islam because they found a book on women's rights in Islam. And so, I mean, like this is something that we have our own thing to be proud of, right? We have our own religious tradition to be proud of. If I have to turn to another tradition to better the situation for Muslims and say, you know what, the Muslims aren't treating their women correctly. Now, in order to get women to get treated correctly, I'm going to go and turn to feminism. I'm going to go and turn to a movement, a social movement that was created by human beings. What am I saying about God? Huh? What he sent was incomplete. What he sent didn't really take account for women. What he sent, like, wasn't good enough for women. I mean, think about those assumptions. Now, does that mean that feminists are all terrible? No, we're not making any assumptions about the movement. That's aside. It's like we're talking about right now, what is our own religion? What is our belief about God? Do we have a good opinion of God? Would God create 50% of the population only to have them harmed and hurt and disrespected and abused? Like, no, he wouldn't create a creation just to have them for the purpose of other people oppressing them, right? That's like, that's not part of his religion. You know, it may happen in the world, but that's not what he's revealed. And if someone believes that God has revealed for women to be oppressed, then what, like, they don't have a very good opinion of God, right? And it's I would say they have a very bad opinion of God. There's a huge problem in their approach to God and who is God. I'm looking at the time and I realize I need to wrap up. Forgive me. I'm just very much like affected by this particular tafsir because of how much our community has been influenced, I should say. And sometimes we don't realize what we're doing when we're doing it. Sometimes we don't realize that, like, there's no reason for me to blur that line in the sand. You know, there's no reason for me to go and like cross and get on the other side of that line. You know, I'm in the right place. I'm supposed to be inviting people to this place, not being pushed out of where the gift that God has given me. It may be that God will forge affection between you and those of them with whom you are in enmity. God is powerful and God is forgiving, merciful. Okay, so this is something that's really beautiful. And in the Tafsir of Ibn Ajibah, he says that God revealed this verse when he saw the firmness of the faith of the companions and how they began to become very strict in basically holding the line with their families who were oppressing them or who were rejecting Islam and part of joining the Quraysh. We know that some of the companions had to face their family members in battle, right, on the battlefield. So, you know, there's one thing to draw a line in the sand. It's another thing to have to raise a sword against someone who's your father or your brother. And they had to do this, right? Some of them did this. And he says that God revealed this verse when he saw their firmness as a purification for their hearts. تطيبا لقلوبهم. How does this verse purify the hearts of the people that they followed what Allah had revealed? But how does it purify?
It validates them.
It validates them, yes. Something else?
You know, like, they must be sad as well. It's not something easy to do.
It's not something easy to do.
That's a lot of
That he's giving them this promise, and this promise, Imam Ibn Ajibah says, was delivered to the vast majority of the relatives of the companions, with the opening of Mecca. Like, swaths of people with the opening of Mecca started to become Muslim, and they became, he says, most of them actually became practicing Muslims, and so love and brotherhood replaced the enmity, and people were able to marry again, and because they all became Muslim. And so, did they all become Muslim by how did they become Muslim? How was it that this group of people that were fighting them and were from their families and wanted to kill them on the battlefield, how did they all end up accepting Islam? They held the line. They held the line when they were supposed to, when it was really hard to do that, right? And then when Allah saw their firmness, it's like, oh, you're going to have them back. They're going to come back to you. And they did. And subhanAllah, there's another aspect of it too, which is if they would have, if they wouldn't have shown a firmness in it, right? Have you ever told someone like to basically not back down on something and they went a little too far? Does that make sense? Like, don't back down. And the person who's like, you're trying to give them the confidence to stand up for themselves, but not only do they not back down, but you're also like worried now. You're like, okay, don't back down, but don't cross the line either, So in this verse, there's also a glad tiding, which is like, don't let this whole situation become personal, right? Like this guidance is still a possibility, right? So you're doing something out of principle. You're not doing something out of like a personal hatred. Does that make sense? So something that I remember telling you guys that I was really shocked once when a sheikh said, if anyone believes that Donald Trump cannot become Muslim, then they don't have a sound opinion of Allah. And then I remember someone saying in a social setting, I was like, I think that's pure hatred. I don't think Muslims are allowed to do that. And they were like, they said something like, I hope Donald Trump never becomes Muslim. I was like, it was around the time that the kids were being separated from their parents at the border, and it was like it was a really trying time in terms of like the idea of a mother and her 2-year-old just being separated. And it's a huge crime. It's one of the most massive crimes. I don't know how we don't give it more attention than what it actually received. But out of sheer like anger, they said that. I hope he never becomes Muslim. And that's not what the Muslim is supposed to be like. Does that make sense? The Muslim is supposed to be like, even Pharaoh was called to Islam, and despite his, like, you still want guidance for these people. So yes, you're drawing a line and I'm not associating and I'm doing my own thing and I'm free from what you guys are practicing. And I realize that you have chosen to reject the truth. So there's going to be animosity forever. And until something changes, right? But what's going to change? If the Muslims hold the line appropriately, the other side, much of that other side, is going to actually enter the folds of Islam, and that did happen. And so he said that this promise was delivered. And so, according to some accounts, after the revelation of verses 4 through 6 that were extolling the example of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and his followers who shunned the idolaters who were trying to persecute them, then many Muslims themselves declared their relatives to be among the idolaters, to be their enemies. And knowing that this was hard on them, God revealed this verse. Also, that God forged affection between them through marriage, for example, when the Prophet ﷺ married Habiba, right? So Habiba, the daughter of Abu Sufyan, is one of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And then also that many of them, the vast majority actually, I don't actually know if there were any non-Muslims left in Mecca after, I don't know the details of it, but we would say that the vast majority of the people of Mecca became Muslim. And so the second one is that they're going to be guided from disbelief to belief. And this hatred or animosity is going to be turned into love and brotherhood and sisterhood. And the relationships that were broken are going to be turned into the real relationships of Islam. And so again, this idea that it may be that God will forge affection between you and those of them, again, from your relatives who are the mushrikeen, with whom you are in enmity, that God is powerful, that God can change people from one state to its opposite. That's very easy for him. That's why it says, Wallahu Qadir, pause. A lot of times in the Qur'an it says like, Inna Allaha, what it ends with, Wallahu Ghafurur Rahim, or Inna Allaha, and then it will mention more than one name. But here it's like, there's a pause. It's Wallahu Qadir, God is powerful. Stop. Like this thing that's such a hard thing to do, that these people are trying to kill you and they're your family and it's a really hard situation. It may be that God will actually change all of this, and these people that were fighting you and trying to kill you will become your brothers and sisters again. He's powerful to do that. It's very easy for him to do that. And he can bring about all of the causes of mawadda, all of the causes of that love and affection which were previously prohibited. And God is forgiving and merciful, and he is forgiving of what the sins that the people had done before, before they repented or before they became Muslim. And he's merciful to them by continuing to offer them guidance.
Ayah 7 is the one that you said, Nazalat the Sahaba. This is the one that.
Yes.
That
Yeah. And what you said is that Allah knows that this was hard for them, and this is giving them that glad tiding. You hold this line out of principle. It's not personal. We don't say things like we don't want Donald Trump to become Muslim. We want everyone to become Muslim. Why would we want other than that for anyone? But you have to hold the line. So inshallah, that's the tafsir for this week. And there's no train to catch. That's why I'm taking my time. And I'm not actually going to see you in person, I think, for the next 2 weeks because I'm traveling. I will try I'll try my best to get out at least the recordings for the class. I'll work with Marcus on that, inshallah. But in terms of an assignment that we can work on for 2 weeks that are related to these verses, I wanted it to be in relationship to this idea of holding the line, which is there's something maybe, and for every person we're in a different circumstance. Inshallah, we're depending on what your circumstance is. So for some people, it could be the workplace, where it's like I'm going to be kind and nice. I'm going to be a nice person. I'm not going to be mean to anyone, but I'm going to create a boundary. I'm going to set a boundary, and I'm not going to let anyone take that boundary away from me. And it's a boundary that's about me being able to practice my religion, right? And maybe that's what the assignment might be, is if there's anyone who is pushing on any of your boundaries as it relates to your practice of your faith, it would be about try to establish that boundary in a good way, but establish it, putting your trust in God. If there's a friend of yours, for example, or a relative or whatever it is, and it could be something as simple as they want to get you to do something you don't want to do, come and watch whatever it is, a movie that's inappropriate, or it could be a backbiting about someone. You know what I mean? Just set a boundary that I'm just not going to do this. And it's a good thing to do. You can do it in a polite way, do it in a nice way. I think we need more of that in our time. And, also if there are people that when you are in their company from your brothers and sisters, Muslim community, that you feel like their company benefits you spiritually. It benefits you in your overall well-being, then trying to be more in the company of those kinds of people. Okay, so I think that's it.
Can you share with us the quote that you started?
The quote that I started. Oh yes. Ali al-Khawas, yeah. The quote that I started with was, and the person who's quoting it is Imam al-Sha'rani, Imam al-Sha'rani, yeah, the one who wrote Adab al-Suhbah. So he said, I have heard my master Ali al-Khawas state, remember your virtues as much as you can, as this will increase your gratitude to Allah. Beware of excessively dwelling upon your deficiencies, for your gratitude will thereby decrease. Any benefit you derive from turning your attention towards your faults, you will lose it by virtue of your blindness to the virtues which Allah has bestowed upon you. And then Ali al-Khawas also used to say, being aware of your virtues is the default. As for your deficiencies, it is only required of a person to reflect upon them solely to avoid becoming awestruck by their own self. Maybe we can add this to the assignment. Is if you want, before you go to sleep at night, if you can think of 3 things that you're grateful for, maybe 3 virtues that Allah has.
It's like a family thing established.
Oh, mashallah.
Before Steve and mom calls all of us, and she'll have us say 3 things.
Okay, so this one's slightly different. It's not 3 general things that you're grateful for. It's 3 things that you were able to, 3 virtues that you're grateful for. Maybe on that day, I don't know, you controlled your temper, when you're talking to someone and you were able to pray a little bit more at a particular time, or were able to give some charity, or whatever it is. There's 3 virtues, like things that you, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed you and you were able to do those things. Maybe try to go to sleep and thanking Allah for those 3 virtues that He allowed to happen, on your hands or through you. Inshallah, we'll just add that to the assignment as well.
May I think about checking the comments?
Yes, I can actually forward it to you. I'll just post it. We need to create a WhatsApp group for this so that I can just forward you guys the related materials. Okay. All right, I just sent it to you. I sent it to your WhatsApp. If there's not any other questions or thoughts, are there any questions or thoughts or reflections?
I guess I have a 5-year-old sister, and she's already having LGBT people talk about that at school. How would you approach that? How would you kind of talk to them about it?
And she goes to public school?
Yeah.
That's really hard. It's really hard. I think it's, and I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of shuyukh hold this opinion. I'm not someone who can make an opinion on this. I don't like issue fatwa or anything, but I would just say that I don't know if public school is a viable option anymore for Muslim children. And you're like, okay, how does that help me? Because my sister's in public school and I can't do anything about it. I'm thinking about difficult conversations that you may have to have with her, like, we're Muslim, they're not Muslim. They believe certain things that are not true. They have to teach it because it's a public school and they have to teach the things that they believe, but they don't take their knowledge from God. And we take our understanding of the world from God and from revelation. And so even if that's what they're saying at school, just that doesn't mean that's true. Yeah. But at age 5, I think that's really hard for a 5-year-old to have to contend with those types. I mean, I don't even know why they're teaching that period at age 5. Like it's so below the, yeah, may Allah help us. There's, I think they started adding things like that to Sesame Street and to Peppa Pig and to a bunch of different children's shows. And so it's like Muslim content creators, we need more than just Omar and Hannah. Like we need some other characters. We need some other cartoons. Yeah.
Well, I heard this one guy said I mean, he was a Muslim, but he's like, if archaeologists dug us up in 1,000 years, they're not gonna know what transgender was. They were like, that was male, this is female.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately where we're all gonna end up. So it's it's black and white or dirt and low.
Yeah. And I mean, there's yeah, that's, I mean, it's a big issue, and we have to, we can't take it lightly. We have, I mean, we have through office hours, there's some of the young people were talking about kids coming to high school and middle school even, and identifying as animals. No exaggeration. I identify as a cat. And saying meow every time the teacher calls on them, bringing cat food and eating it in class instead of lunch, literally dressing the part or whatever. This is, they're getting rid of reality, you know what I mean? This idea of the idea of an objective truth. What's your truth? What's my truth? There's so many truths. There's infinite truths in the world. No, there's not. That's not. So it's really not letting people or removing the foundation by which a human being can even just stand.
It's normalizing delusion at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And psychologists and therapists, by the way, are condoning it. They're supporting it. They're saying if a little kid says they feel like they're this or that, you should just support it. And there's also all these statistics about how that has affected people and affected them long term. And it's this is really highly, I mean, you're playing with with fire. This is, may Allah protect all of us and help all of us and our families and protect the wider community too. Because I actually feel sorry. I feel so sad for people who are following this, because the fact that they have fallen into these traps and they believe in what some therapist has said because would they say this 30 years ago? Would they say this 40 years ago? It's like, no, this idea that we're continuously in some kind of progress is such a lie. Like, just because it's now means it's better, that's a lie. Now does not necessarily mean better, Okay.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, like, there's like people that are in that community that are like, this is all wrong, this is all messed up, like, I wish I could go back and change it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you could share that with your younger sister too, like, this is the other side, but they're not gonna teach you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's, because of the multitudes of different people and they're following something, they believe in it, it's almost like it's become its own religion. I actually feel like the only way that Muslims can have a positive impact after people have been brainwashed, because you can't do that unless there's a certain amount of brainwashing. Like, it doesn't come naturally to pretend you're a cat, and not just pretend, but identify, like, now this is what the person's identifying and coming to school, is kindness, is just kindness, and like, it is not acceptance, but kindness. I think there's a difference between the two, and we don't have to follow those, what are they called? What are your pronouns? Like, no, I'm not going to use, there's two pronouns. I'm only going to use them if you're offended by it. I'm offended by the fact that you're changing the pronouns on us in 2022. So, anyways, I hope, inshallah, the majlis continues. We don't get shut down. And this line in the sand is not something, that is the end of us. But may Allah help us and protect our communities and protect even the people who are falling into this stuff and blindly and thinking that it's somehow like more wise than the way things, whatever it is, like, may Allah guide everyone away from this and somehow make the reality of these things clear for everyone in an undeniable way, so that no one else suffers from it. Yeah, inshallah, we're going to close. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma wafiqna lima tuhibbu wa tarda, واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. Peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen.